We have just wrapped on the first month of 2025. I make it sound like we're making a film. And here are all the books that I read this month. In case you missed it, at the start of this month, I made a very candid video about myself and my brain and how bad my brain is, and how for now at least, I'm going to be focusing my attention on fantasy books, science fiction, comic books, escapism in general. I want to have fun. I want to enjoy escapism. I need it right now. A lot of us need it right now. And true to what I said, all of the books that I read in January were fantasy, science fiction, and comic books. I had a really fun time escaping into so many different worlds. I've got a lot of videos planned based on the books that I've read, and reading finally feels fun again, so it's working. But before I get started, I also just want to remind everyone that I also work as a freelance book editor. This month alone, I have edited 2 novels and 3 short stories. It's been a really busy month for my editing work. I've actually put out fewer videos as a result, and I love this job so much. I love being a book editor. I'm really good at it. My rates are very reasonable. Sometimes I think too reasonable. So if you're a fiction writer with a manuscript, whether it be anything from a short story to a big massive fantasy novel, you can hire me to be your editor. There is a link in the description to my portfolio. Here are some of the amazing things that my clients have said about my work. Pause to read. So if you're looking to self-publish or traditionally publish your work, you need to get it edited, and I will edit it spectacularly. Now let's crack on with everything I read in January. As usual, this is in no particular order. I just put the stack together and I'm going to work my way down it. Starting with something pretty unusual, and a video is coming soon. Eisenhorn by Dan Abnett. This is an omnibus collection of 3 novels and I think 5 short stories. It's a pretty big beefy thing, and all of these books are about the titular Eisenhorn, a protagonist in the Warhammer 40k universe. Why did I read this? Well, a few weeks ago I decided to pick up and play Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 on the PS5. I had such a fun time and I found myself really attracted to the lore of this world. I never thought I'd ever be someone who'd be into Warhammer. I've never liked the idea of collecting and painting little miniatures, but the world was so engrossing and I wanted to know more. So I picked up this book. The reason I chose this one was twofold. One, I'm a big comic book reader and I've read a bunch of Dan Abnett comics in the past. He's a very good comic book writer. And 2, I went online and people say this is the best place to start reading Warhammer, because the universe of Warhammer 40k is enormous. It is staggeringly big. You've got the main game, which involves buying and collecting and painting miniatures. And then you've got video games and books and comics, etc, etc. I played one of the video games and I thought, yeah, let's check out the books. This is good. This is really good. I haven't read the whole thing. I read the first short story and the first novel, and I'm going to continue dipping into this book over the next few months and then probably just keep reading. My favorite science fiction writer in the whole wide world, Adrian Tchaikovsky, he wrote a Warhammer book about 2 years ago that I can't wait to read. And now that I understand the world of 40k, I can just keep going. I am falling down this rabbit hole very gently and I'm having a good time. Next up is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I made a video recently about how I have decided to start reading Brandon Sanderson. His world is enormous. He has so many huge books out. Last month I read the first Mistborn book and it was wonderful. I've got the rest of the trilogy ready to go, but I wanted to check out something smaller, something standalone, something that I could easily digest. And Tress of the Emerald Sea is a really charming fairy tale-esque adventure story. Oh, it's so moving, it's so sweet, it's so funny. When the humor lands in this book, it feels like you're reading a Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett novel. It's incredibly witty. Sanderson is also really good at writing a variety of diverse characters within his casts. The majority of this book is set on a pirate ship, and one of the pirates is deaf and communicates with a writing tablet. That was really cool to see. There's also a talking rat, an ocean that isn't an ocean, They're actually spores. I'll go into it in much more detail in a future video, but Tress of the Emerald Sea is such a charming and sweet and considered story. There is variety and colour and nuance and humour and beauty to this tale. It's very, very heartfelt, and I loved every page. Next up has to be one of the most powerful and yet criminally underrated fantasy books of recent years, The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. Now, I'm a big fan of his work. About 6 months ago now, I read his debut novel, a science fiction book called The Vanished Birds. It's somewhere behind me. That thing really challenges storytelling mechanics and traditions, and this takes that even further. This is a story within a story. The framing device is written in the second person, placing you as a particular character, and you are being told this story. You enter this kind of dream world where a performance takes place on a magical stage, and that performance is the main novel. And that main novel is a pretty simple story. It's set in a world where a tyrannical emperor rules over everything, and our protagonists are two young men who have fallen into a journey together in order to depose the emperor and bring freedom to the land. And it is one of the most moving and beautiful things you will ever read in your entire life. There is a love story that brews here between these two young men. The journey that they go on is captivating and so thought-provoking. It feels like a folk tale for our time, and I need everybody to read this. It's going to feature in a few upcoming videos next month, so I'll talk more about it then. Next up are two romantasy books that I read right at the start of this month. The first is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is a really fun, explosive, engaging book about a young human who was raised by the king of the vampires in a land that is ruled over by vampires, and humans are second-class citizens. In order to prove herself, she joins this kind of Hunger Games thing, which usually only vampires compete in, and she decided, no, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring and see how I do. Early on, she meets a young vampire, and the two of them start up a kind of camaraderie, working together until they can't anymore. The book is described as enemies to lovers because that's basically like an SEO key phrase. You use enemies to lovers and people sit up and pay attention. But they're not enemies, they're just two people who fall in together and you know that they're gonna fall in love. It's not enemies to lovers, but it is really, really fun. And it is also a slow burn because there is no romance between them for the longest time. You just know that there's going to be. But I do have to say, and I didn't mention this in my video before, towards the end when they finally get together, and that's not spoiling things, you know how it's gonna go, they have sex and the sex scene is horrendous. I can't go into detail, but there is a moment where he reveals an appendage and she kneels down at the altar of this thing like it's a statue of Jesus. The description of this thing and her reaction to seeing it, how it's the most beautiful, elegant thing she's ever seen in her life. She's captivated by it. She is emotionally moved by its beauty. I cannot get over how fucking funny that was. I read the whole thing out to my partner and we were creased up laughing the whole time. I honestly can't get over it. The other romantasy book is also the single best romantasy book I have ever read, The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon. Holy moly, this is good. This is a really powerful, impactful, and super duper fun work of romantic fantasy. When I put up my video, someone did mention the fact that this was originally a Reylo fan fiction, and as soon as that was pointed out, I could see it. And it works. It works way better than The Rise of Skywalker did, because that's one of the worst films ever made. Like, I'm sorry, how did that happen? I swear it's because a small vocal minority of wrong people didn't like The Last Jedi, the best Star Wars film, and Disney actually listened to them and put out the worst film ever? Like, don't listen to those people. Are you insane? Rian Johnson can do no wrong. The Last Jedi is the best Star Wars film, come at me. And this is really, really good. Honestly, if you're not sold on romantic fantasy, if you think it's not for you, which I thought for the longest time, and I still don't like most romantic fantasy, I promise, if you like good fantasy fiction, give this a go. This is good fantasy fiction with a really, really good romance. Genuinely excellent. This is the book to win over all fantasy fans to give romantic fantasy a go, a serious go. This book spits in the face of Fourth Wing, A Court of Thorns and Roses, all those other bad ones. This is genuinely excellent. 2 videos back, I did a big retrospective of the wonderful works of N.K. Jemisin, and one of those was this comic book, Far Sector. I won't go into detail here because you can go watch that video. This is a standalone Green Lantern story about a brand new Green Lantern who is sent off to the furthest reaches of the universe to fix an enormous society made up of 3 races that live in one giant city together. It's absolutely wild. It covers so many social topics. It's really, really powerful stuff. And it showcases that N.K. Jemisin can do anything with any medium. Fantasy, science fiction, comic books. She's just the queen of it all. Far Sector is fun and funny. Jamal Campbell's artwork is electrifying and soothing somehow. There are plenty of fun action scenes, but this is also a deeply thought-provoking work of social fiction. I also read the follow-up to Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao. This is Heavenly Tyrant. It is very different to Iron Widow, and I did a full video explaining the differences between them and how a lot of people seem to misread Iron Widow. Fans of Iron Widow don't seem to like this book. They're pretty disappointed by it, and I think they're wrong to be disappointed. Heavenly Tyrant is phenomenal. Go watch that video and you'll understand what I mean. One of my favorite comic book creators in the whole wide world is a guy called Chip Zdarsky. A few years ago now, Chip Zdarsky was the artist on a really, really clever comic book written by Matt Fraction called Sex Criminals. It was about a guy and a girl who both stop time after they finish. They've both had this power for ages, and then eventually they randomly sleep with each other after a party, and they're shocked to find out that the other has the same power. And what do they do with this power? Well, I think the first thing they do is rob a bank that the guy works at to get revenge on his boss. So they go into the bank, they sleep together in the bathroom, they stop time. It's really, really fun, and his art is amazing. But now Chip Zdarsky is writing comics, and his writing is phenomenal. He's been writing Batman for a while, and his Batman is the best that Batman has been for years. Genuinely excellent. Batman is back on top form thanks to Chip Zdarsky. And here is another comic of his that I read just recently. This is a non-canon Avengers story called Avengers Twilight, and it is set in the far future where Captain America is now an old man. The United States has fully fallen to a fascist dictator, but that dictator is actually a clueless figurehead who is being puppeteered by a tech bro billionaire. Sound familiar? And that tech bro billionaire is Tony Stark's son. Captain America gets roped into a faction of rebels, and together they try to fix the US. It is electrifying. I love this thing so much. It's so clever and so powerful and so full of hope. And finally, I won't dwell on this too much because I'm not done with it yet. I've been reading Tom Taylor's run on Nightwing. There are a total of 6 volumes, I believe, and I've read the first 3. The 4th one is just down there, and I'm having an absolute blast. Tom Taylor is one of the best writers working today in the world of comic books. He has done an amazing job with so many different characters, and for a few years, up until recently, he was writing Nightwing. And his Nightwing is wonderful, absolutely inspiring. Once I've read all 6 volumes, I'm going to do a massive video on why Nightwing is such an important character in the world of DC. If you're interested, look forward to that. It's coming soon. Hopefully. There you have it. That is everything that I read in January. I think because I'm focusing on fantasy right now and fantasy books are pretty big, I'm not reading quite as many books as I was before because they're bigger. They take more time. But then that kind of gets evened out by reading lots of comic books. Anyway, I had a blast. I hope you did too. Let me know in the comments what books you read in January. And once again, if you've got a manuscript and you want me to work on it as your editor, the link to my portfolio is in the description. Check it out and subscribe for books.